I really believe most of us in healthcare are here. We're wanting to do the right things. And it really is, issues of, do we have people? Do we have a clear vision? Do we have people aligned with where we're going? And do we have processes and systems to help support them and doing it as easily as possible? But no, I started my career at Mayo Clinic after graduate school. I did my fellowship there. And then I think some of the transformative kind of pieces were with some of the specialties. When I started working, we had substantial financial issues. These were like 2008, 2009, everything was crashing. Some of the practices had some variables that patients presumed were more elective care than they actually are. But, so volumes dropped. You're dealing with staffing, stress, financial pressure, regulatory payment changes. I mean, ultimately, 2008, 2025, there's a lot that's still the same. There's a lot that's different, but there's a lot that's really still the same in terms of how we work and what needs to change. But
welcome to Medical Money Matters, the podcast where you can find experts, answers, and resources so that you can achieve mastery over the financial and business aspects of your practice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Medical Money Matters. I am joined today by Adrienne Lloyd, who is an MHA, FACHE. She is the founder and CEO of Optimize Healthcare, where she helps medical organizations build empowered teams and sustainable operations without burnout. So I want to hear about that. She also has more than 20 years of experience, including executive leadership roles at some big name places, the Mayo Clinic and Duke Health. Adrienne brings a deep understanding of what makes healthcare systems thrive. She is also the creator of Day Zero Blueprint, which is a transformative framework for leaders looking to reset their strategy, culture, and execution. Adrienne is a nationally recognized speaker, coach, and she is the host of MGMA's Women in Healthcare podcast, where she champions authentic leadership and systemic change. And it was my pleasure to join Adrienne a few weeks ago on that very podcast. So Adrienne, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Jill, I love that intro. That was amazing.
So great. I sometimes when I hear intros, it kind of makes me tired, right? Like, oh, wow, that was a lot. I love it. Well, it is a lot. You have an impressive career. I mean, from Mayo Clinic to Optimize Healthcare, that's a pretty remarkable journey. And having had executive roles in those places and then founding Optimize Healthcare. So I'm anxious to learn about what you're doing with your clients, what you're seeing in the market, and maybe think a little bit about the pivotal experiences that you had in those leadership roles that had you really focusing on helping healthcare leaders build empowered teams.
Yeah, no, it has been a great experience. Amazing people along the way, amazing groups, definitely challenges for sure. I really believe most of us in healthcare are here. We're wanting to do the right things. And it really is, issues of, do we have people? Do we have a clear vision? Do we have people aligned with where we're going? And do we have processes and systems to help support them and doing it as easily as possible? But no, I started my career at Mayo Clinic after graduate school. I did my fellowship there. And then I think some of the transformative kind of pieces were with some of the specialties. When I started working, we had substantial financial issues. These were like 2008, 2009, everything's crashing. Some of the practices had some variables that patients presumed were more elective care than they actually are. But, so volumes dropped. You're dealing with staffing, stress, financial pressure, regulatory payment changes. I mean, ultimately, 2008, 2025, there's a lot that's still the same. There's a lot that's different, but there's a lot that's really still the same in terms of how we work and what needs to change. But it was actually during that time I learned Lean and Six Sigma training, which I have incorporated into what I do with not only solving my own problems or working with my teams along the way, as I kind of found myself in several turnaround situations. But I feel like those are tools that can really be helpful. Just, breaking down the change, understanding what the issues are and coming up with ideas to get the team to engage. I probably don't teach it in the most traditional way as a pure black belt might, but I like to kind of plug and play those tools as you're really using them to create those cultures of change and innovation. Definitely moments there where we had, substantial multi-million-dollar gaps, and have had clients that I work with on the consulting side similarly, where we're really trying to understand not only, I think a lot of time, one of the things that comes through is you can't cut your way out of a hole all the time. You really have to focus on how do we grow there's only so much you can do from an expense perspective. So really, I think working through those things in tandem with the teams, bringing people to the table to kind of set like, this is where we are. This is where we need to go. We as leadership definitely don't have all the answers. We don't even know what all the problems are. Like, we need your input and we need you to help us get there. I think those things really helped shape both what, I'm able to share on the stage, which both my parents are teachers. So, it finds
You've
its
got
way.
it in the genes. Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, there were some very painful kind of moments and scenarios where you're looking at, how do we continue not only to retain the teams that we have to make margins because we want to be successful so we can have resources for new technology and increases and all of those things. But if we don't make changes, there may actually be worse repercussions. And, there's really kind of shape you into who you are when you have to both dig internally deep to understand like best where you can serve and where you lead, but also, how and where you need to pull team members in to help you with that.
Yeah.
But
Well, I love seeing the lean thinking and the Six Sigma science being brought into healthcare more. I think in the early days, I remember conversations back, as early as the early 2000s about lean, and it was a very foreign concept at the time. And I think there was a lot of pushback because, and rightfully so, to some extent, it's like healthcare is not a manufacturing environment. Like, and I heard from many physicians, we're not making widgets. Yeah. So there's that whole notion and the pushback, but there's so much to learn from and be informed by that whole entire science. So I'm so glad that you're bringing that and continuing to have that in the conversation, because we need more of it. We have a lot of process in healthcare, and I would say we have a lot of broken process or really inefficient process. So yeah, well, that's a great. Go ahead.
Oh, I just add on to that. I think too, now what we're seeing is shifting, and you and I were talking about it in a previous conversation, is now with the advent of AI, it really is time to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what are the things? Because AI is not going to go away. And we don't ever want it to fully replace our humans, our connections with our patients, our clinical care. But like, how do we use that as we think about the processes in our teams to really kind of supplement and accelerate what we're able to do so that we can have bigger impact and increase margins and all of those things too. But really, it's a great, I think, time to use all of those things in tandem.
It's a fantastic tool. I think there's a lot of fear out there about AI and what's it going to do. Yeah. In our conversation, I love that notion of that AI isn't going to replace physicians, but physicians who use AI will replace those who don't. That's sort of a stay with the times message there. And again, thinking about those replicable processes, those are the things that are perfect to hand off to AI. And if you've been doing the work with Lean and Six Sigma, then you know which processes you have replicable. And so, it's there's so much great science there. Really great. Good segue to talk about your Day Zero Blueprint, which is your signature program. So as I understand, that is aiming to transform leadership and organizational culture. So I'd love it if you could just walk us through some of the core components of that and how you use it with clients.
So it definitely kind of ends with Lean and Six Sigma, if you will. I think that's one of the things when I started doing it. Definitely a whole episode will not be focused on Lean Six Sigma. But, I first started doing it, it really was like helping me take these super complex situations of like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, and break it down. But what I learned along the way is to really, really get there, you've got to understand more about yourself as a leader. So I start with the program of, like, I'm a John Maxwell certified DISC instructor. So we do the DISC leadership style assessment, which I've taken many different forms, but what I like about his is it really focuses on like your communication style and what just innately comes easy to you and what you love to do and what you don't, kind of struggle with it. I've just had a few more leaders take it, and they said, like, how can it be this accurate within 15 minutes? I'm like, I don't know. It was kind of creepy.
little uncanny. Say the 4 types, because it's been a long time. I've done DISC as well.
It's dominant, influencing, steady, and compliant. And there's actually none of us are one specific, it's all combination. So his actually will put them together and kind of come up with your profile type of maybe an attainer versus a peacemaker versus a challenger, or I'm actually a concluder, which can be good or bad because I do tend to kind of look at problems, put things together and come up with solutions really quickly. But then I have to pause and make sure I've got enough information or I'm asking the right questions. And so more of a dominant influencing. But it's interesting when you look at somebody who's maybe more of a peacemaker style, which is like the steady and compliant, and putting them in, they end up often in like COO roles, other C-suite roles, because they're great with people, they're able to keep things moving forward. But when they start to have the types of change that we often experience when organizations get in difficult situations, like it's not their innate, you know, instinct to love that environment, first of all, and be able to navigate through that. So it's not that they can't do that, they can be very successful, but just understanding different things about yourself. And I think it's a great tool to have these conversations with your teams and be able to say like, yeah, I know this is easy for me. I really like this. Or, when you give me a problem like this and want me to solve it and I don't have a clear vision or clear endpoint, like I really have to process or I struggle with that. And just to have those pieces. So we start with that work. And then I also, one of the other things that was pivotal for me from a learning and development perspective was around really crucial conversations and crucial accountability with Gary Patterson. So I try to help walk them through, because a lot of people, especially I find often if they've come from maybe a clinical background, and physicians are no different, as are we on the administrative side, but struggle with the framing clear expectations. What does success look like as an organization, as a team, as an individual? And then like, this is where you are, this is where you're not performing. How do we get there? And so I walk through that framework, which is really good. But the reason it's called Day Zero in the first place was it was really, as I found myself in turnaround situations, what I started saying was like, today is day zero. Like whatever's happened in the past is in the past. One of my other colleagues in the ophthalmology space said that she's done something like this before, and they actually had a funeral, where like everybody got to kind of bury all the things they were going to miss so that things used to work. She's great. It really is. This is where we need to go. This is what's working. This is what's not working. How do we get there? And we need your input as a team, because I think that's what I found as personally, and I've seen other leaders can do, is we can tend to take on all of the issues and the like weight of, we have to solve it all, and we want to solve it all, but ultimately we really have to create the environment where things get solved and we're supporting the teams versus doing that. And that's when I really created the program, was to help give people a framework to learn how to navigate those situations and be able to kind of have that full reset with their team, whether they've been in the role for 10 years or they just joined an organization. And then it moves into, okay, now that you've kind of gotten your mind around like, what do you want to create for yourself, for your team? Then we go into kind of, here's Lean and Six Sigma and how you can use those things and plug and play to, again, make it easier to get movement, get some quick wins so that people start to feel the momentum in the organization. Because often that happens too, is people are like, well, we've been saying we're going to change for years, or I've been hearing this, there's 3 other super CEOs before you, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really kind of that framework to help them. And I have it in both an online course format where people can do it independently, or I do it with group coaching too, which can be really great if the whole team's trying to really shift the organization culture.
Fantastic. Well, I love the notion of the blueprint. I mean, I think that's super useful for groups. If they're we run into a lot of groups now where it's like the hits keep coming. We had the pandemic. We're still, as you and I were discussing earlier, still trying to come out of that. And we've got flat or declining reimbursement, and we've got burnout and all these leadership issues. And it can feel a bit like, you're on the beach and you're too close to the water and the waves keep coming and you can't get out of the way.
There's shots behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a perfect lead in, I think, to think a little bit about leadership and burnout. And that's obviously a conversation, that a lot of people are involved in that conversation right now. But what strategies do you recommend to leaders, both preventing their own burnout, but then also how do they support the well-being of their teams?
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of understanding and paying attention to what, really comes easily and naturally to you and what you enjoy doing. I always ask that when I interview people, like, what do you enjoy most about the jobs you've had? And what's one thing you'd never want to do again? Which can be really telling if you're hiring for like a data analyst and they don't really love being,
they don't want to sit in a cubicle. Yeah.
Work. But, I think a lot of times we just keep moving so fast in healthcare. And I'm sure for physician practice owners and for the other physician leaders, it's the same thing, right? Like you're going in, you're seeing patients, you're trying to manage the books. And it's like, do we really take time to pause and think? So one of the first exercises I always do with clients when we're doing executive coaching or in groups is that I call it like a clarity tool, but really thinking about where are you, what's working what's working professionally or not working, but also what's working and not working personally. And a lot of, I think us as healthcare leaders, as physicians, and we're not always great at taking care of ourselves. And I've been on kind of my own healthcare or health journey, personally lost like 50 pounds and really just trying to pay attention over the last few years of, because I think as I went through COVID, kind of same thing, working a ton of hours, trying to keep things moving, other things personally working through. But I hear that a lot from clients too. And they're embarrassed to admit like, oh, I've gotten here. I'm not taking time to either spend enough time with my family, work on this relationship, taking care of my health. And so if you aren't John Maxwell, the saying you've heard other places too, is like, you can't fill from an empty cup. And I think that's what contributes to burnout. A lot of times, many of us, unless you're in an environment truly that is on the more of the toxic side, the negative side, you don't feel supported. If you're in that culture, then there is a limit to how much any individual, not that we shouldn't try to change it, but there is a limit to what you can do. And at some point you do have to kind of make that decision for yourself. But assuming that environment is not what's causing it, we really can have to take ownership of what do we want to create for ourselves in addition to what we're trying to create from a team and organization. I think that is really key. And some of that starts with just that initial assessment. Some of it starts with looking at your calendar. Are you giving yourself any time to do the work that you feel is important and is going to move the needle? Because I've had 10, 12-hour meeting days, 5 days a week at periods, and then you're going home and trying to squeeze in the emails and all the things. And it's just, it can only last so long before you hit the breaking point.
For so much. I think it's a great example too. And I see it, I'll be sexist for a minute. I see it more often with women. And so I love the work that you're doing to empower women in healthcare, including hosting the podcast, Women in Healthcare, which I think is fantastic. So what kind of systemic changes do you believe are necessary to really advance women in healthcare leadership roles? There tend to be a lot of women in healthcare, but as you get into those higher echelons, into the C-suite, they're not as many of us there. So what do you think?
I mean, I think in general, it's just, there's still a lot of stigma around, taking time off for those things that are important. It should be important to any parent or or even if they're not a parent. I mean, I think we all have something, those moments in life. Maybe it's an ailing parent. Maybe it's just a friend that's, having a baby or having another life event that someone wants to be there for. I had one person in a group I was coaching where he's like, I really want to I want to date and I want to meet someone. He's like, but I can't do it when every time the clinic's running late. He was an administrator and he's trying to manage the practice and the late meeting. And I know our physicians feel the exact same way, right? Like if you have no predictability to your life, it's hard to create space for those other things. And then let alone time to grow, take on that extra project and do those things that are going to get you visibility such that when the role is open, that you're moving forward there. So I think those things are very important. I'd love to see more in general support benefit programs that offer kind of those non-traditional benefits to support people. And maybe it's even discount programs to grocery delivering services or housekeeping services or other, obviously gym memberships is becoming more standard for those things. But, what can organizations do to help take care of the whole person so they can show up in a different way? And I think there's many. I definitely don't have all the answers there by any stretch. So I definitely think there's more conversations to come for that. But I think just increasing awareness of, I'm blessed to know many, many women who have, continued to grow and excel in their careers, but, they've had to push and advocate for themselves too, which is, that's one of my favorite things when I do get the chance and the honor to coach from a executive coach perspective with some of the female clients. It's really helping them push the buttons, because it's still a lot of times where we won't apply unless we've got 9 out of the 10 or even 10 out of the 10 qualifications listed on the posting, right? And we're still expecting them to tap us on the shoulder for we don't expect it, but we hope they will. We hope that when the time comes, we've been told that we'll be ready for the next opportunity. And unfortunately, it's just most likely not going to work that way, and not out of malice, but you've really got to be your own advocate and find other people in the organization or outside that are going to help help not only advocate with you or for you, but also be that accountability partner and that support, kind of prodding you along. Like, what are you doing this quarter, this year to really kind of help you grow and move to wherever you want to be?
Yeah. Well, it's a great reflection. And I'm just sitting here thinking back to there are so many more opportunities than there were in the 80s and 90s when I started my career.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking if you and I and our contemporaries stay in this conversation and continue to advocate for female leadership, then perhaps our daughters will have an easier conversation with it. And perhaps their daughters will have it,
Yep.
even more a chance of really true equality
Yes.
in the workplace. And I would love to see that. We could have an entire podcast on that topic, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I never thought I would. I mean, I thought I would always do consulting. I thought it would be like a retirement job. I didn't really
Mhm.
see that as being an entrepreneurial venture. I took many different roles that I didn't necessarily expect going into it too. So I think that's the other thing, is just being nimble with what you want, and also giving, all male or female, giving yourself permission to say, what I thought I wanted, what I was driving towards it may not look the same way. I think our whole world looks different, right? Post COVID, and will
Yeah.
continue to AI next 3 to 5 years, who knows? And so being willing to say, like, these are the things that are really valuable to me
Mhm.
personally, professionally, what do I really want to focus on? And knowing that there's
Right.
many different forms that you can have impact, I think is so important too.
Absolutely. And I hope again, as we continue to sort of move forward, that we have some non-traditional roles and we have some non-traditional structures. And I see, people like you and me, entrepreneurs who are willing to take that risk as women and can kind of write your own ticket, but it comes with a lot of hard work and a lot of
Yeah.
time and energy that we give up or that we choose, the
Right.
career over other facets of our lives at times. And it's an ongoing project to try to find the balance that works for you and your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation we can
I
have
know.
there.
I've talked about it, but I mean, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina now, but I come from a very small town in the mountains of North Carolina. My parents were teachers, so education was always a big thing for me. That's been critical. It's a lifelong journey to
Mhm.
continue to learn and evolve. But no, I mean, there's definitely that motive. I truly believe anything's possible for you to create what you want, which
Yes.
is great. But there are moments where you really are having to dig in, put in the work. There's moments you have to stick your hand up and say, hey, look at me, or I can help, or how do I help?
But
And then there's other times where that looks different and you're able to create your own. But yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
a
So
lot of facets to leadership. I love
yeah.
it. Well, our next question, one you and I spent a little bit of time exploring on your podcast, was this notion of financial literacy for clinicians. And I'd
Yeah.
love to hear you reflect on that a little bit and how you approach that in your practice.
Yeah, I think financial literacy for clinicians, physicians, staff, nursing teams, technical teams, anyone, and even the front office teams too, right? Like, I think a lot of times when, as leaders, we may not share the numbers pieces for a variety of reasons, but
Mhm.
sometimes make me feel like we're trying to protect our teams. But for example, when I was going through one of our first kind of transformations, and we had a negative $4 million budget or margin that we were really trying to turn around in a specialty that should not be in that situation. But we had to go through with the team and kind of share. And I just started with, they didn't need to see all the numbers, but they needed to understand, like, here's what it costs us to take care of this kind of patient. Here's what we actually get reimbursed for Medicare. Here's where that gap is. And so I know we've got a beautiful facility, we've got beautiful resources. It may look like it shouldn't matter that we have staff here with no patients, or that we
Yeah.
aren't actively trying to grow. But it does. And here's why: because it's not sustainable. And we also want to be able to help more patients and serve more patients because they need care. So coupling those things, I think, is very important, because they often don't understand, like, what those drivers are. And I think too, I have similarly on the physician practice, ownership side, it's everybody's, I think, really channeling through trying to do the right things, but there's only so much time. And so the more that you can be aware of what the factors are coming in on the revenue side and what you need to do on the expense side. As I mentioned earlier, like it can't just be expense management. Often it needs to be like, how do you grow? How do you continue to establish partnerships, create a stronger marketing referral base? Like what do your Google reviews look like now? Like what's your presence online? All of those things. Are you getting out to networking events? Like all of those things play into, can you be financially sustainable no matter what happens outside of you? Because there's only so much. We know we're not going to get paid more for what we do.
Yeah. No.
So,
So it's either do more or do differently or create
right,
some other revenue streams. Yeah,
right.
I don't know that I've heard this, but maybe this is a term you and I can coin today, which is sort of financial resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you going to be
Yeah.
able to weather the storm the next time, a contract gets cut, or, the next time you have an early retirement of one of the physicians in your group that wasn't planned, or, that's all the things.
And we want them to, like they have to. There's not enough medical care, in the country, period, especially, in rural metropolitan, really anywhere. But I have a soft spot for kind of the rural areas too, where the access to care needs to be, it has to be there. My parents still live in a very small town. Like there's not a lot of great care. I mean, as things start to happen, you want to be able to access and feel comfortable that they're being able to get to those providers. So we
Yeah.
want them, they have to understand. And I think if they get into a point where they feel like they can't keep up on the financial side or they need it, assistance, I think that's where I can help to some degree. But, and people, there are many, many others like me, as well as your team around just getting more educated. I think what's great about your podcast too is just, this is a great safe space for them to start kind of learning on their own as they're driving home from work or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the hope. At any rate, it's really the podcast and the book, from my perspective, are created as a gift back to a community that's been really good to me for more than 30 years now. So
I
I'm
think it's
hopeful.
just,
Yeah.
you don't have to do it on your own. I mean, that's
Right.
really why I created the Day Zero Blueprint leadership framework, for the leaders to start to take off that weight piece by piece,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're
Mm-hmm.
building a team with you. And I think same thing on the financial side for clinicians. It can be embarrassing to feel like you don't know the answer, or you don't,
Yeah.
should I be asking this question? But I think that's great about what you're able to do there
Oh,
too.
we
So
talked about that. I think we talked about it on your podcast, that whole knowledge shame culture that we have still in medical schools. And that if we can continue to kind of call that out and say, when you get into the business environment, it's really okay. And it's empowering to say, I don't know, as long as you follow it up with, here's how we're going to find out, or where can I go for some more information. But yeah, where I'm afraid we sort of drill that out of our physicians in medical schools.
yeah,
Don't ever say I don't know. And there's good clinical reason for that, right? Because the I don't
right.
know from a physician could have some pretty dire consequences for a patient. So there's that piece of it, which is understandable, and yet we graduate them without a whole lot of skill set to
Right.
communicate when they don't
Yeah.
know, and all of that. Yeah, and an open invitation to all the physicians listening is, please say I don't
Yeah.
know. That's-
Yeah.
well,
Agree.
the people working with you will stand right in. Well, Adrienne, I know you and I could talk for days. We'll have to do another one of these and pick another fun topic. But I'd love to hear from you as we close up. Just looking ahead, as you look at the upcoming years, we've talked a little bit about AI. We've talked a lot
Yeah.
about lean and transforming leadership. What do you think are the emerging trends that are going to have the most significant impact on healthcare, say over the next 5 years or so?
I do think AI is going to have the biggest impact. And again, I think there are aspects of it that I scare all of us
Yeah.
if it's taken way too far. But
Yeah.
on the base level, if you're not using, the tools, whether that's Chat GPT, Poe, Claude, other things to help you. Like when I did my own disc assessment, and from previous assessments, I kind of assessment junkie, but one of the things for me is like, I can actually write really well, but to create those initial drafts, it just take me a lot of in mental energy. I tend to procrastinate them. So using a tool like a Chat GPT or Claude, where it can actually generate some ideas, can help me move more quickly. So if
Mhm.
you're not using things like that, using it to even analyze data, you could put a financial spreadsheet that you have questions about in there and say, please help me understand, please give me definitions. Any of those types of tools for yourself or your team, I think really encourage your team to start saying like, hey, is there a way, could help us with that, or that
Yeah.
can make this easier to do? So I think embracing at the base level, and then starting to think about, again, not necessarily even replacing your team, but how do you supplement
Mhm.
those even minute tasks sometimes that don't really add value for a team member to do. Like, is there a place for some of that to occur with
Yeah.
an AI solution?
Yeah.
And then on the broader scale, there's some great conversational. I'm working with a couple groups on conversational AI and bringing that into the front end as well as on the art and the revenue cycle management side. What can be done with be a small bot inside of
Yeah.
what you're doing, or an entire solution that maybe does all your prior auths, so you're not to make those calls and your staff are not having to do that. So, as with any implementation or any process change, you want to map out who's going to do what, how is this going to work, what's the fail safe, how are we going to know it happened correctly, that kind of stuff. But I do think there's just so much opportunity that will allow you to maybe serve more patients, or at worst be able to, maybe, or at best be able to, get you out on time more consistently, so you have more space for the rest of the things you want to add in your life. So
Wonderful. I
yeah.
like it. AI as a potential solution to burnout. I like that. That's a whole nother conversation in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much for the time today. We will make sure that your website and your email are in the show notes for all of our listeners so they can find you easily. And again, my thanks for being here today. What a great conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Jill. It's always fun.
Likewise. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Medical Money Matters podcast. Before you go, let me ask you, are you ready to take your medical group's coding to the next level? Because that's where Code Mastery comes in. Code Mastery isn't just another coding program. It's the ultimate physician-to-physician training solution to maximize your revenue and empower your physicians with the skills they need to code confidently and win the coding game. From comprehensive high-octane training to actionable insights, Code Mastery gives you the edge you've been looking for. Don't leave money on the table. Visit healtheps.com/codemastery to learn more and take control of your coding today. Let's transform your practice's financial future starting now. See you next time on the Medical Money Matters podcast.